Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Diverse Industries 2023 conference. To kick off our week-long conference, we are here virtually today. My name is Elena Garner. I'm the Executive Director of ODI. We're really glad to have you. We have some really great stuff lined up for you. A few quick reminders before we get started. Please make sure you're muted on the Zoom so as to respect our speakers of the day. If you have a question, you can go ahead and put it in the chat or raise a virtual hand. We will have some designated time for questions and we will get to them. We just want to make sure that we have the speakers on the spotlight being heard on their microphones. And additionally, all of the content will end up on our YouTube page and our website. So if you're missing us live, you'll be able to check it out later. You can head to onediversity.org, on onediverseindustry.org for more information. Feel free to ask any questions about that. And with that, I am so happy to introduce our first speaker. Thank you, Jarret Meyer, for being here. Jarret is an American media entrepreneur who co-founded the record label Uproxx Records and the YouTube talent company Big Fame. He also started the digital media brand Uproxx. Meyer is a graduate of Brown University and is a proud artist and community advocate. A few years ago, Warner Music purchased his company Uproxx, and he continues to serve as the division's president, overseeing content, media, and brand partnerships. So thanks again for being here, Jarret. We're so glad to have you. We'd love to hear what you have to say today.
Well, first of all, I'm really excited to be here as well. As you can see from the background, which is a really cool background, I'm here on the Uproxx Sessions set, which once a week we broadcast from here a new up-and-coming talent or someone that hasn't broken completely mainstream yet, and we give them an opportunity to perform. We do it with one camera, one take, no editing. So this is where we go live. This is the spot.
Fantastic. That is really cool. Do you know who did the art behind you?
I 100% know who did the art behind me, right? His name is Julian Gross. He's a fantastic artist. He's actually a Grammy-nominated artist. He's the creative director for the group Yeah Yeah Yeahs. And the creative brief that we gave him was we wanted to feel like music and energy and culture had been happening in a club for 20 years. And at the end of the 20 years, what would that bathroom look like?
Right? That's dope. Yeah.
Yeah. And he knew exactly what to do.
Yeah, it's perfect. Put the brand to a team.
Actually, the other thing I'd say is Julian created the original art, but every time an artist comes in here and performs, as a way to create a bond and culture and community, we ask them to sign their name or write whatever they want. So it started with just Julian, but there's a lot of different names and tags that now design these walls.
Wow, that's really incredible. It looks really cool. I can't wait to see how it turns out, truly. Yeah. And you said you get to do this every week? You see your artists doing this?
We do. We're open. We have a couple different A&Rs that reach out to the music community, and it's really our way of staying in touch with young talent and making sure that they know that Uproxx is a place that has an open door to them on their way up in their career, so that we can work with them at all different phases.
That's really awesome.
Thank you.
Speaking of Uproxx,
yeah,
it's your passion project, your thing.
Yeah.
We would love to hear your origin story and your path to founding that.
Sure. Well, I'd have to start my origin story growing up in New York City in the 70s and the 80s, which is a privilege of proximity at the time, right? To be in New York, to be around the culture of downtown art culture, hip hop uptown, punk rock downtown, and to be there as it's developing. That's something that you couldn't access yet without the internet. It was pre-internet, so you had to be there. So immediately I was born with just that luck of proximity. And my afternoon activity after school was enjoying New York, going to record stores, looking at club flyers, just getting myself involved with everything that the city made available to me. And I, became someone who was obsessed with music and records and dreamed of getting into the music business. And I think at the beginning, I saw myself more on the creative side. I thought I was going to be a music producer, like I thought I was going to be Rick Rubin, um, not Russell Simmons. And there used to be this party in New York called Soul Kitchen, which was exactly like what it sounds like. Like instead of serving fancy cocktails, they served 40 ounces and they played throwback soul. And it was like a kind of like a cool downtown who's who in the music industry. And I used to hang out there. And I was able to hustle my way into a meeting with an A&R guy. And so I met with him, me and my business partner, my best friend growing up, Brian. Brian and I met with Dominic Trenier, who went on to be a very, very famous executive. And we played him some music that we were working on. And he was like, look, guys, this is not sonically, this is not it. He's like, but I have to tell you, the packaging, like we had like we wrote like a business plan, like we were like so excited about it.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, you hustled this meeting with me. You came in with like a business plan. He's like, are you sure you're on the right side of the desk? Like, and I'm looking at him and he seems so cool. And I was like, oh, I could go home and I could hone my craft for the next 3 years and work really hard. And maybe I will become good enough at this thing I want to do. Or what he does looks really, really cool. And I think I'm already qualified. Like
Mm.
I think so that day, Dominic gifted me the inception of you can do this. This is available to you. Go out and do it. And at that moment, I went downstairs with Brian and we're like, we're gonna start a record label. And that was the beginning of Rawkus Records.
Wow. And without that conversation about, nah, we don't like this sound, you may have never found this
One of
path.
one of the greatest gifts I think that you can give yourself is finding out early where your superpower is. And if, look, the only way to do that is putting yourself out there and hearing what everyone has to say. And I don't think you should be deterred from bad feedback,
Mm.
but it's feedback, right? Like I said, I had a choice. The choice was keep working, and then maybe in 3 years or 2 years or whatever, I'll be good enough, and then do that. Like if that's where you're, but I didn't feel like that was my only option. I was like, well, then you weigh my options. I think I'm could be really, really good at what that guy does. That guy seems cool to me, right? So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, you see things on TV or you read about them and you think that's the only path for me.
Mm.
And God, I really wish something like this existed where there was a list of like, here are all the jobs. Like
Right, right.
right, like the person that did this for me, he's a creative director. Like, and I think now people kind of are starting to understand what a creative director is. But I didn't know what a creative director was when I was 22.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't really know what an A&R exactly did, but you force yourself into these worlds and you learn. And I think the quicker you can do that, the better path to success you're going to have.
For sure. You mentioned leaning into your superpower.
Right.
Do you feel like this was the moment you found your superpower? Do you think it was a trial and error? And do you think this superpower has changed at all in your time in the industry?
Wow, it's a very good question. Yeah, I think I early on learned that my superpower was helping creatives um, make a living, unleashing their superpower, marketing their superpower,
Mm.
whether it was, making their albums and marketing them and distributing them, or what I do now with Uproxx, which is uh, combining musicians, and culture with brand partnerships and content. Um, and I always loved what I do, but I think the other superpower that I realized that I had early on was an ability to navigate when to play by the rules and when not to play by the rules. And I think that's probably the most nuanced lesson for young aspiring entrepreneurs, right? So here's what I'll say about that. The rules exist to keep institutions in place, big
Mhm.
mechanisms, big companies, big platforms. And the rules exist to keep those things in place because those things work. They may not work for you, but they work. They create a lot of revenue, a lot of profits. They keep a lot of people employed. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, how do I participate in these institutions and these rules? And when do I divert from them? And when you're doing the rule thing, right? And there's a lot of benefit to being part of a system because they work. But
Mhm.
when you're doing it, it's a clear path. And on that path is a lot of speed bumps to slow you down. They don't like this path going fast. There's a speed limit. There's a lot of signposts that say when to turn right, when to turn left. The moment you say, okay, I'm not going fast enough here, this isn't working for me, and you jump onto your own sort of pathway, that's a wild path.
Hmm.
It's a really wild path. And
Trailblazing.
right. And so you need to know that path is going to take a lot longer than you think. It's not the straight one, and there's no signposts on it. Um, and I was always kind of comfortable on it, and I'm
Hmm.
comfortable bringing people with me on it, and I've made others feel comfortable and excited about doing it, and also never too proud to say, okay, let's jump back on that other path for a little bit. Right. You had mentioned I have a relationship with Warner Music. That's been a great relationship for Uproxx.
Hmm.
Working with their incredible roster of artists and executives to make Uproxx a much bigger platform and media offering and create bigger partnerships. But at the same time, sometimes I feel like I'm just a 25-year-old in a basement too,
Yeah,
so
for
you
sure.
gotta, and I think the superpower is loving both things and being comfortable in both things.
For sure. Wow, thank you so much for that.
Thanks.
You've talked a bit about making it in the music industry and your path to get there. What does making it really mean to
Mm,
you and in the wider landscape of the music industry? It's
right.
literally,
Um, well, I think you know, okay. Let me go back to the rule thing real quick. I think there's only
Mhm.
one rule that we should all care about at all times, which is, are you contributing to the culture?
Mhm.
Whatever culture that you are trying to be part of, because if you're in the music industry, you're in the culture business. If you're in the media industry, you're in the culture business, entertainment industry, culture business. So making it is when you feel like you're contributing to the culture. And uh, one of the things I want to make sure young people know is they have the opportunity to make it really early, because too often they do this like fake it till you make it thing, and
Mhm.
then making it is always like, oh, but once I've done this, I've made it. Once I've done this, I've made it. And then it's a quest for a goal that's you never reach and you're never happy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, if I walk into a room and it's got some seasoned executives and a bunch of like young, interesting people, I'm looking at I don't even want to talk to the seasoned executives. I already know their story, right? I kind of
Mm-hmm.
know what they're about. I'm looking at like, what are these young people doing? Like, where, what are they thinking about? And if I start talking to them and they're telling me they're doing the fake it till you make it thing, like, they're just trying to be like the other guys in the room, they've already lost the plot because I want to grab them and be like, no, you've made it. Like, you're the
Mm-hmm.
most interesting person in the room. You're the one I already want. You're the person I want to talk to. And what I'll say about that is, like, if you're throwing a party with your friends and there's like 30 people there, but you're doing something interesting, you're letting one of your young friends like do a little runway show, and you're letting one of your other friends DJ, like, you might be doing the coolest party in your city.
Mm.
Right. So when I think about like what Uproxx is about, we want to shine a light on young culture, up and coming creatives, entrepreneurs. Like, you might have already made it. We might not have found you yet, but we will find you. The world, the industry that exists to shine a light on culture will find you. You don't need to tell us about how you went to this party and you met ASAP Rocky, like whatever. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I care about you. I want to know about you and your friends and your crew. And if your crew is already contributing to culture, you've made it.
Mm.
The monetization, the fame, all of that stuff will happen because you're creating something pure and you don't need to dress it up and do the fake it till you make it thing. You made it. It's that simple.
You've already made it.
You've made it. You made
That's
it.
a,
And
that's a really
enjoy it. Like, that thing that that special thing you're doing with you and your friends, that might be the coolest thing.
that is a really refreshing take.
Yeah.
The thing that you have
The
is
thing that you
already
have.
enough. You've already made it. You just keep making your art, keep staying in your genuine self, and the monetary parts, the brand deals will come. That's
It
a
will
really good
come. You're
idea.
you're you're already the coolest thing. Not everyone's found out about it yet.
Right. Man, taking that little nugget with me. Love that you can just be as you are, show up as yourself, and
Yeah.
especially for young people.
They have it. They're already the coolest thing. They have all the fresh ideas. Like, they, by being young and interesting and tapped in, they're already the most interesting person in a room.
Wow. Any advice surrounding stepping into your authentic self? Any tips you would give
Yeah.
for embracing that you already have it?
What 100%. There is a secret. There is a secret, and that is community.
Hmm.
Community is the secret sauce to fast tracking success, right? And your community may start with you and your best friend. It may be like, okay, me and my best friend, we're going to go out and meet people. We're going to go out to certain parties. We're going to hang out in certain, bookshops and certain record stores, thrift stores, whatever it is. And then we're going to take chances. We're going to show up places. And then you add another person to your squad and another person. And then all of a sudden you have a real community. Community is it's the rocket fuel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like at Uproxx, what we do, and we're a big platform now, so we're always looking for young communities to keep us feeling fresh, right? We want to tap in to them, and maybe we can add some reach, and maybe we can add some history, but that fresh energy, which is why I'm here today, which is why I wanted to do this from the Uproxx session stage, because this is all about reaching into communities where people are creating fresh sounds and saying, hey, come on our platform, because we literally need what you're doing. My day one success with Rawkus Records was all about community. We had we built the label pre-internet, and we in some ways had more of a networking community that you can even build today using all these incredible devices of social media, right? So my office was a few blocks from Washington Square Park, where all the artists would meet up and hang out and rap, and they would hone their skills. And that was a few blocks away from Fat Beats, where we actually sold the records. And then that was a few blocks away from, New York Poets Cafe, where artists would perform at night and talk to artists, rappers and poets would come together, and they would build and active, and there was a level of activism. And then everything was just a few blocks away from Hot 97, when it was time to, once we had really created our community, we could basically march down there and demand that our records were played. But that's not something, right? Hot 97, right? So, or MTV, that's the rules, right? Going back to the rules, you have to know, and those rules exist to protect these big organizations, but we wanted what they had, right? I felt right, we're like, oh, we want the distribution, we want the platform, but we're not showing up and asking. We're showing up and saying, you have to. Right, you have to recognize this community that's so strong now, this movement that's so real. And the truth is, before we even marched down there and demanded that these records were played, they reached out to us. Those DJs, they reached out. Funk Flex was on, DJ Enough. Those guys were reaching out saying, oh, I'm hearing about what you guys are doing. And they started playing our music. MTV started playing our music. Fred Jordan at MTV, Beth Gibbs at MTV played our music videos, because they recognized that we were building, we didn't have to fake it till we make it. We were making it by just being us and building our own scene. So be your authentic self, but don't do it alone. Find other people that are like-minded and build your community. And then by the time the establishment reaches out to you, you can decide if you want to mess with the establishment. And maybe you might say, you know what, I'm good. You might say, I'm good. I've done it. I've knocked down all these walls on my own. I don't need you. I think if you want to go all the way, right? One of the pieces of advice I give aspiring artists is, look, not everyone is made to knock down walls. So it's going to be you and your crew, and maybe the label you're signed to is not built for it. And so you're knocking down walls, you're building community. That more of establishment element, sort of like rule following element of your crew, maybe it's the label part, your manager will circle back and say, okay, I get it now, let's rock. You have to make a decision. But if you're open to maybe not being angry that they weren't there with you, and not, if you're just happy to have everyone walk to the next phase with you, I mean, who knows how far you could go. So, community one, and then being willing to take everyone on the whole journey, I guess, is part two.
Wow, that's really incredible. Community.
Community, and letting, being open to everyone being part of it.
Right. I mean, that's why we do this whole conference, right? We want to bring people together, and we want to support students and aspiring artists and creatives.
That's why I'm here.
Well, thank you so much for coming. This is really great. We have a little bit of time left for some questions, if anyone has questions for Jarret. Otherwise, let me look in the chat. Right. I don't see many questions, but I will leave with this last question for you,
Sure.
Jarret. What do you feel most proud of in this community that you've cultivated?
Oh, well, my relationships. I am still friends with the artists and the executives and everyone that worked the records, the DJs, the street teams from my day one world, like, and people are actually surprised when they find out that this is who I hang out with. Like
Mm-hmm.
right. But
These are your real life friends.
these are my real life friends.
Yeah.
you know, I made it because I built real friendships around this community that has given me so much. And it's not just the famous people. I mean, like, it's the people behind the scenes. It's the artists, the designers, the DJs, the promotions people, the publicists, everybody, the writers. And where I can look back at my relationships with all these people over 20 something years and be like, these are all really good people.
Mm.
And we all came together around art and culture and music, and now we get to enjoy those things, and maybe talk about our kids and drink some wine and like,
Right.
and just be cool with it. Yeah.
For sure. I love that. That's great to know. I hope to have my tribe with me in the next 20, 30 years as well. That
I
sounds
want
like a
everyone I
great
want
goal.
everyone to have their tribe with them. It's a really a gift.
Really. We have a couple questions rolling in the chat.
Sure.
The first one says, what was the first moment you were like, oh, okay, I've made it? What was the first moment for you to feel that way?
Well, I kind of go back to saying, like, I I think at the time I was guilty of always saying, well, once I hear a record on the radio, or once, but I can look back now and know that it was actually before then. You know, the first album we put out on Rawkus was a group called Company Flow. LP from Company Flow is in a group now called Run the Jewels, which is a massive group. And I just remember sitting with him and he showed me the artwork, and it was so different and so crazy. And I just knew before we did anything, I was like, if it's this music and this artwork and nothing sounds or looks like anything else that's out there, we've made it. We've made it because we're breaking a rule and we're doing it together.
Right. That's awesome. Next question we have here is, what do you suggest for the first step of getting into the music industry? For someone who's just now discovering
Yeah.
this, what's the first step you suggest?
Well, there's a lot. The hard answer is there's a lot of things to do, right? There's a lot of things to do. And I'd say you have to try everything. That means try to work everywhere you can. That means, like, in a nightclub, working for a promoter, a musician, a DJ, a social media company. Like, just kind of do anything and everything. And that's on the business side. But on the cultural side, ask yourself, like, what part of it do you really feel passionate about?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a certain scene, go make yourself part of that scene. If it's a certain artist, find out, how you can help out that artist. Like, maybe that artist needs social media help, or, a person to monitor their comments, or whatever it is. Just give to this thing that you eventually want to give back to you, and get involved any way you can. The other thing I'd say to people is, nobody was ever hurt by knowing too much.
Mm,
Right? Like,
that's a good
so,
one.
like, if you're interested in the business, read every book, learn every bit of history, like, sometimes I am disappointed when I meet people and they seem underprepared,
Mm,
or if I see people in an opportunity, and they're underprepared. What I'd say to anybody is like, no one was ever hurt by being more prepared. Like, just do
right.
more work, study more. Um, if you want to work for like a DJ, for example, it wouldn't hurt to know every song in his playlist on his last set and mention a bunch, like just do the extra stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone does kind of want the same thing, right? There's a whole world of everyone wants to kind of be in a world where they can make money and be creative and forge their own path. So having the most joy, being the
Mm,
most prepared, having the most fun, being the most organized, you know, kind of just do a lot and do the most. I don't know what else. And it will come to you. It really
right.
will.
So have fun. Love what you do. The ultimate dream. Be yourself
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like what you're doing.
The dream becomes a reality when you do the most work,
Hmm.
Um, but that work should be fun, right? Like
Right.
that work should be fun because what that work does is it allows you to also break the rules at the right
Hmm.
time because you're no longer afraid. Oh, on that path there are no signposts, but that's kind of okay because I'm prepared
Hmm.
and I got my squad.
Right. Never alone.
No,
Thank
yeah,
you so
it's
much,
never
Jarret.
alone. It's definitely never
Never
alone.
alone. I'm going to take that one too. Be my new spiel. Well, that is about all the time we have for this section. But Jarret,
Thank you
thank
so
you
much.
so, so, so much for coming to this conference and supporting us. In future, is there any way that students can follow you and see what you're doing, what you're working on?
I
Anything?
think the best thing if they want to see where my passion is follow Uproxx on all social media, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. Go to our website, see what Uproxx is posting on LinkedIn. I think that's another good way. We try to post about more of the business angle, some more of like the brand partnerships and the events that we're doing, and then culturally follow all the content that we're making, and then you know do all the work, learn all about it, show up. We'd love to see
Great.
you.
Fantastic. So everyone check it out.
Yeah,
Uproxx on all socials. And thank you so much again. Really great having
absolutely.
you.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are getting geared up for our next section of the virtual conference. Again, my name is Elena. In this next section, we are going to hear a panel from Rob Barnett, all about industry tips and making it big. So head over to our YouTube to catch up there now.
Okay for you?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just jump right in. Yeah, welcome. I'm Michael Smith, CMO of NPR, and I'm here today with Rob Barnett. Rob's a headhunter and author. He's a highly sought after guest speaker. He's had a long and successful career as a media executive and as an entrepreneur. Rob founded Rob Barnett Media in 2018, which is an inclusive platform for thousands of job-seeking professionals and industry leaders, which really helps place the right people in the best jobs. Rob has discovered and hired and led hundreds of talented creators and executives in senior management roles at companies like MTV, VH1, and Audible and Amazon. He was president of programming, at CBS Radio, and he was a digital pioneer. He founded My Damn Channel, one of the first original online studios and networks. Representing diverse careers, companies, and opportunities, Rob's multi-platform content and no-nonsense approach has inspired people to define and sell their best professional brand. So he's really a great person to have today to talk about how to get into the industry, how to succeed and thrive within the industry. Rob, let's start with your personal story, though. Who were some of the most influential people in your early life, and that got you kind of lit the fire for you to get into the industry?
Well, of course, it's my mom and dad in different ways. You know, my father was a madman. If you ever watched the show Mad Men on television, that classic show, he was kind of like the John Hamm character. He was an advertising executive. And so from a very young age, I saw this guy moving around the halls of media companies and entertainment companies. And I got really interested in that. My mom was a school teacher, and her dream was for this little boy to someday write a book, and I did that. It's back there over my shoulder. So, my parents gave me this real focus that I had, which became a passion, loving books and music and movies and television and all the rest of it. From a very young age, I became media obsessed.
And then when you got into college, were you at that point thinking about going into media as well, or were you thinking more about literature, or English, or?
Well, I was the writer and the editor of the high school newspaper. So when I went to college at Boston University, similar idea. I wanted to think about getting into journalism, broadcasting, and film. So that's what I studied, wrote for the school newspaper, but then I fell in love. I fell in love not with a human being, but I fell in love with the campus radio station. And from the minute I walked into that little room, ba-boom, my head exploded, and I realized I needed to get in there.
And what was it about radio versus TV and print and film? And what was it about that medium specifically that spoke to you?
Well, as you see behind me, I've always been a music nut, and I always listened to radio as a little kid. I actually got to see my first concert. People never believe this, but I saw my first concert in 1967 when Jimi Hendrix opened for the Monkees. That is a shocking, true story. And I was hooked on radio and music ever since I was a kid. I just loved it so much. So when I walked into that radio station, the wheels started turning in my head, and I thought, oh yeah, I want to do this, like, for real.
Mm-hmm. And then when you're a college student, how do you get connected, or what's the path to actually get a real job in the industry?
The path for anybody in college to figure out what the working world is like is the magic of internships. And that was such an honor for me to be able to get, in my case, working with some of the best broadcasters in Boston at the time, shadowing those folks, learning from those folks, developing friendships that gave me the kind of experience that was needed to see if I could turn that all into a job at some point.
And then how did you get an internship? What was the thing? I mean, because obviously in the media industry, it's pretty competitive to get one. So what makes you stand out, and any unusual stories of how you like broke through?
Well, I do this every day now as a headhunter. There are so many people that bring this idea that cover letters don't matter. I'm on the other side of that fence. I say cover letters matter a hell of a lot if you really want to earn an interview with someone as an intern or in a full paying, highfalutin job. You've got to learn how to make a compelling pitch using the best case you can about proving to that business why you're someone that they should talk to.
Mm-hmm. So really communicating. I guess if you're going into the communications industry, if you can't really communicate about yourself, it's kind of hard to get people to believe that you're going to be able to communicate about anything else.
Amen. But I'll also add to that, Michael, and say that I found in the last few years that the most compelling cover letters are not just about yourself, but it's showing the business that you've done some homework, that you've put in the time to really prove in that letter that you have an understanding about who they are, what they do, and how they're ticking.
And you started early on with MTV and VH1, which I guess was probably perfect for you, right? Being so interested in music. What was it, the early days of those networks, and how did you even learn to go after them?
Well, in the early days of MTV, turns out that there were a lot of folks like me who were working at music radio stations, and that's where they started finding executives and bringing them in to switch over to the wacky, wild, and woolly world of television. So I was not there at the very beginning, but I was there at the tail end of the 80s when it was still one of the most magical places on earth. I had amazing bosses who taught me how to make the world of television a real thing.
It's an interesting example of how having an interest in a particular part of media or a genre, say music, probably when you were really young, there was no MTV. So, but the platform and the opportunity kind of emerged. And I guess it's happening today. If you're really interested in music, what your job may be may not even have been defined yet, I guess, right? I mean, with all the new technology.
It's a great point. The media is changed by tech on a constant basis. So you always have to have your ears open and your eyes open and, frankly, your heart open to bravely diving into things that are new, because when they're new, there's a chance to get in. It's a little easier to get into things when they're new versus 10, 15 years later when those businesses become much more established and have thousands of resumes. Sometimes a little easier to get into that dangerous, scary pioneering phase of businesses.
So the openness to new things, I guess, is a good piece of career strategy advice. Do people need a career, like a formal career strategy? I mean, did you have one, or did just sort of things just happen? Or
well, ideally, if you have a strategy, you can get to where you want to go faster. A lot of people, when I worked at MTV, would come in and interview for the concept of working at MTV. They didn't realize till they came in that all these big famous media companies like NPR, the one where you are, it's a thing, but on the inside, it's many, many small groups of people doing other things. And so the best way to get a job is to focus on what area of a company really looks like the one, first, that your heart wants to be at, second, that your head says, hey, I've got some skills that really relate to that area. And then, of course, third, how can I best make the case that this is the right role for me?
Yeah, that's great advice. So when, after you've been doing that for a while at one company, how do you know when it's time to move on from a company versus when is it time to maybe say you have some obstacles within a company, stick it out?
It is a great question. And I actually wrote about this in my book, which is called Next Job, Best Job. I came up with a little test for you to answer that question. If you're in a job and you're starting to think maybe it's time to go, I call it the alarm clock test. And every morning when you're in a job and the alarm clock goes off, you wake up and you've either got two things that come out of that state of semi-consciousness. Thing one is, I'm raring to go.
Mhm.
And thing two sounds a little something like this. And when you start to feel stress every morning when you wake up about a job that you're on, it likely means, more often than not, it likely means that you've got a boss problem.
Mhm.
The problem working for a difficult boss is something that is probably the most common thing that affects every worker. And if that gets to a point where you're waking up every day and you're feeling like it's not fixable, then that's the time to secretly start looking for work in another place.
Now, some people, actually a lot of people, start looking for work at other companies, but then there are others like yourself that actually think about starting their own thing. So what led you to start your own media company and take that and bet on yourself, I guess?
I'm smiling now, Michael, but I wasn't smiling then. The answer to that question was a horrible boss. And I will go ahead and name that person because you can read about it. I was called the president of CBS Radio. It's a pretty lofty job title, but it wasn't very fun because I was working for one of the most famous people in the media business. His name was Les Moonves. And that guy was one of the toughest and sometimes nastiest people that I've ever worked for. It was brutal. It was brutal to be yelled at and screamed at in a role where you're just trying to do the best that you possibly can.
Yeah.
So when I was let go from that experience, I went home and thought deeply about what was next. And that was the part of my life where I decided that all of the risks that we all face in the difficulties of working for another company could somehow be compared to the risks that any of us would take if we decided to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
A lot of people take that path, but I decided it was time for me.
Yeah, I think it's a great point when you think about all the turmoil and the layoffs and acquisitions going on in the media industry. People, like you said, sometimes think that entrepreneurship is riskier, but actually it may not be as risky. What was your proudest moment, you think, in terms of just looking back over your entire career? What are some of the moments you're most proud of?
Well, I have one that I don't believe I'll ever be able to top. It happened when I was a very young man. I was working at my first big job in a radio station up outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And I got a secret tip that the Rolling Stones were going to be moving to live on a farm that was about 20 minutes from my house. That farm had a recording studio, and that farm had a rehearsal space. It's a long, long story. But at the age of 21, I was able to convince Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones to do a private, tiny performance in a nightclub for me and only 300 of the listeners of my radio station. It's the wildest thing I ever tried to pull off, and somehow I did. And like I said, I don't think I'll ever top it.
Yeah, that's amazing. That sounds like we have this thing at NPR called the Tiny Desk, which is an intimate concert. And it sounds like you were the precursor of that 40, many years ago. So you talked about a bad boss experience. Who are some of your favorite mentors, though? And how did they help you?
Well, thank God I've only had a couple of horrible meanies, but I've been so blessed and so fortunate to have great bosses throughout my journey. We used to say back in the glory days of places like MTV and VH1 that it was sometimes better to ask for forgiveness than it was to ask for permission. We
Mhm.
were taught that rule by a lady who was one of the great leaders at MTV, a lady named Judy McGrath. And she instilled in so many of us the need to take risks on the job, to not sit there afraid all the time, to step out and try something that was new and innovative that hadn't been done before. You know, if you're working in a creative business, creativity is something that really doesn't flourish in a state of fear. Creativity doesn't flourish if you're afraid that if you take a risk, you might get fired. That creates an environment of boredom and safety. And, you know, we were just taught and raised and managed by people who took big, crazy swings. And I just, to the end of my life, will thank those people for allowing us not just to take risks, but sometimes make mistakes and learn from them, as opposed to making mistakes and getting fired because of them. We were very, very lucky.
Yeah, over the years at ODI, we've had some speakers like yourself from those early MTV days. Actually, Judy was one of our keynote speakers a few years ago, and that kind of advice was fantastic advice about just trusting your people and giving them the freedom to make mistakes, but also just surprise you with amazing creativity.
Bless her.
You're a leading expert on how to get hired and how to get ahead, but what are you telling younger job seekers today? What's maybe a little different than you might have been telling people 5 years ago or 10 years ago when you were giving people advice?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Unless you've won the lottery, unless you're a former lottery winner, I don't think that uploading a cold resume for a job equals truly applying for that job. You may think it does, but if you upload a cold resume, you're missing the whole part 2 of what a job search really needs to be in order to be successful. You've got to put on a detective hat when you're applying for a job. You've got to do your homework on that company. You've got to try to find a person in a leadership role at any company that you're applying to, and you've got to use any means necessary to go after folks that work there or folks that you know and try to get the answer to 3 questions. Question 1, who is the hiring manager? Question 2, can you please try to get me that person's email? And then the third and final question, the best one, would you be willing to make an introduction for me to the person making the decision? I hate to say this, but I am not a fan of human resources. Bless their hearts. They're necessary for a lot of what they do, healthcare and benefits and protecting us from global pandemics and figuring out the difference between hybrid and all of that. But when it comes to hiring, I'm sorry, they just slow the whole thing down, and it can take weeks and weeks and weeks to get interviewed. So if you're on a job search, go find the hiring manager or go find a friend that can get you there.
Yeah, that's great advice, because I think about, you explained the role of human resources, and most people who work in human resources are not necessarily experts in the thing that they're recruiting for, and so may not be necessarily the best people to identify the talent. But the hiring manager who's doing the work every day, it definitely knows what he or she wants, and if you can get yourself in front of them, you have a much better shot. What are you hearing from employers and hiring managers in terms of their biggest complaints about job seekers, like what they're doing wrong?
It's a great question. I think complaint number 1 is that people see job postings and just apply without stopping and really looking at the detail on that job description, and then looking in the mirror and being as honest as possible and saying, look, I know that most people are not going to fit 100% of the requirements on a job description. But if a candidate can't honestly say yes to about 70, 75% of the requirements on that job description, that it's really not a good idea to apply. It's wasting everybody's time, including the time of the job seeker. So I think you really got to look at yourself honestly, study these requirements, and try to avoid these dangerous words that all job seekers like to use. Job seekers like to say, trust me, I have transferable skills.
Yeah.
But hiring managers don't really like to hear it. They'd rather see that you have the actual skills that they're asking for on that job description.
Yeah, they want to see that you actually transferred those skills, not the promise that you will. Which is something I advise people a lot of times, that how you transfer those skills may not have to be in a big job at another company, but are there other things that you've done in your life or are you currently doing that would be expressions of those skills that would make you credible? On just jumping around I want to talk about DEI a little bit, and 2020 with the racial reckoning in the United States, and there was a huge focus on that issue, and now we're 3 years out from that, and it seems that the mood has changed. I've noticed that there've been a lot of turnover among DEI executives at big companies. There's been some talk that maybe there's a pullback on commitments, or what are you seeing?
Well, I'll first talk about the past. I worked for some of the biggest media companies in the world, and I went to many town hall meetings called Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And the God's honest truth is that for decades, those were not a lot more than words in all of those meetings. I didn't see a lot of action. There wasn't a lot of change. But as you said, 3 years ago, those words became real at most every business that I worked for. And as an old white man, I made sure that my little business was doing everything humanly possible to answer the call that was being put out by companies to make sure that every search had great, qualified, diverse candidates. And so we've been doing that in our little business for 5 years, placing more often than not folks that don't look like me, because change became real. And the reason why it became real is because people had to make the effort that they were not making in the past. In the past, people used to say, well, we didn't get any diverse candidates, and then they just hire the white face. And this was a real crime that went on for ages. So I can tell you that as recently as today, I'm working with a major media company who, with this search, says we will not move forward with this search without making sure that there are great, diverse candidates that are considered and that are in the finals. Mm-hmm. So I personally haven't seen the pullback. I've personally been really inspired to see that, as I said, maybe only in these last 3 years, there's a change that's real and a change that's continuing.
Yeah, I would agree too. I think that once you get below the noise, sort of all the political stuff, I think the companies are realizing that there's just a change in their audiences that sort of require you to, and we're in the business of making stuff that people like, and more we're like the people we're making stuff for, the better we'll be, I would think. So let's talk about remote and hybrid work. I mean, that seems to be, since 2020, the other big thing that came out of the pandemic era was this change to remote and hybrid. And how is that, you think, affecting the job search for people?
I really believe that in all the loss and sadness and dark clouds of COVID, this topic, Michael, is the silver lining. This is a radical change, as significant as the last topic we talked about. But with this change, I started as long as 3 years ago, finding that companies were completely open to placing people in full-time jobs with full-time benefits that were 100% remote. Mm-hmm. And that has continued into 2023, although there's now been a significant move in many companies, certainly larger ones, to the hybrid environment, as you say. And that is for many companies, 3 days a week, butts in chairs. But think about how funny this is. I think about this all the time. If you and I were working together in the time before COVID, and you were my boss, and you called me in to the annual performance review, and you said, Rob, you've done really, really well. We're not going to be able to give you that significant a raise this year. Sorry, the times are tough, but we've decided that you can now work from home on Mondays and Fridays. If you would have said that to me, Michael, 5 years ago, that would be like getting $1 million bonus. Now, here we are in 2023, and it's kind of sort of the norm for a lot of companies. And then as a headhunter, you see job candidates sort of demanding it, So there's a lot of that here now, and God willing, we don't have another global pandemic. You may see more companies going from that 3 days to 4 days. But here's what I say to job seekers. Let me just make this one last point. When I'm on a job search and we've gone through a whole lot of candidates and we're down to 1 or 2 finalists, once the company falls in love with you as the candidate that they really want, you might find in that final negotiation that there's a little more flexibility on location than there was when they first posted the job description. So I just want to put that out there to folks and say, get into the process, get that most important first interview. And then 2 or 3 interviews later, you start looking like a finalist. You might have some more flexibility than was evident at the beginning of the process.
Yeah, I guess it's like what people used to say about salary negotiations. Like, don't really think about that at the beginning. Just sell them on you first, and then you'll have much more leverage with whatever, salary benefits, other kinds of things that you need down the road. But so I guess it works with hybrid as well. The other thing, I guess the final thing I wanted to touch on, which is all the rage now, it seems like the next thing after AI, after hybrid is AI. I'm not sure where it's going, but obviously there seems to be a huge hype craze. Everybody's, every company has AI task forces and thinking about what they're going to do. How does that affecting the job search, or has it started to affect the job search sort of process itself?
You know that I'm not actually real, right? You know that. This is simulated, right?
Or people sending their avatar to do interviews.
Yeah, I'm not actually here. Look, back to that discussion we had earlier about human resources. I am all about making sure that real humans, the best humans possible, are in media companies making these decisions, including the decisions about how to handle AI. So I'm a people person. I've been one my whole life, and I still believe that it's important to find the best person. And the only way you can really do that is in an interview. By the way, another radical change that we didn't mention is this, right? We're Zooming, you and me. We're Zooming right now. And it's so easy to jump on these screens and get to know people as the humans that they really are. God, I hope we don't lose it.
Well, one of the things I've been hearing from AI experts is that it may be less of a consumer product and more of a B2B or internal tool that companies will use the same way the PC and sort of revolutionized how companies do work. And so maybe one of the biggest things, and you touched on it in terms of understanding and researching the companies and the people that you're interviewing with, is that you could, as a seeker, leverage AI to just help yourself just gobble down more information about companies and research industries more efficiently, and just sort of superpower your ability to know everything there is to know about a particular company or field.
It's such a great point, because I'm telling you, the candidate who's done the most homework about the company is likely the candidate that will get furthest along in the job interview process. You got to do the homework. And you've just made a great point about how this can help job seekers.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it's been great chatting with you. And any final words of advice? I mean, you dropped so many of them. We could make a.
I'll tell you this. I really appreciate the honor of helping folks, and I did the best I could to put every piece of advice I've got in my book. And if anybody is watching this through you and they want a free digital copy of that book, I'd be happy to share it.
And where can people find you in online or social media to get more information and to get your writings?
The unusual, strange name of my company is as simple as Rob Barnett Media. So it's robbarnettmedia.com. And all we do is there. We post full-time jobs. We do working career sessions with folks one-on-one to help you get that resume, LinkedIn, cover letter, all where it needs to be. And we also post videos constantly. I've done over 1,000 daily videos helping job seekers. So you can find all that stuff, and the book is all at robbarnettmedia.com.
Well, great stuff. And thanks for joining us. And yeah, I look forward to our next conversation.
Hello, everyone. Elena here again for our third session of our first kickoff day of One Diverse Industries, You Incorporated, Becoming Your Own CEO. It's great to have you. Thank you for being here. In this session, we are going to be having a conversation with Joy Profet, who is just incredible. She is an entrepreneurial, inclusive, and results-driven leader with success in optimizing full business potential through solid leadership and stakeholder collaboration. She is all about DEI and supporting students. So we are going to welcome Joy here today. Joy, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Elena. It's a pleasure.
Great. So we'll start a little bit with we would love to hear your background in media and entrepreneurship and how you got into this section of life. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, well, so first I wanted to thank the ODI attendees for joining this incredible purpose. I really do believe this organization and even you participating in this, it serves a greater good and impact for the media industry. So when I was entering the media space like 20 years ago, I won't age myself or date myself, but it was over 20 years ago that I was entering the media space. We didn't have these kinds of networks specifically designed for diverse students to be successful in their careers, let alone the media space. There was a lot of trial and error. You just kind of had to hope you found your way upon a mentor who would hold your hand and guide you through the learnings, and then hope that across your career journey, you had more wins and more hits than you did misses. And unfortunately, I didn't have these types of networks. I didn't have, the plethora of mentors to help me. So I feel as if I had more misses along this journey. So please, it's my passion to participate in these types of organizations, these types of events. Please take full advantage of all of the learnings and then all of the networking that ODI will provide you. All of these resources, it's incredible, it's invaluable, and it will make a tremendous difference to ensure you have more wins and more hits in your career. Again, Elena, thank you. I wanted to thank you again. I wanted to thank the ODI leadership for inviting me to join this, and then to also tell my story and to share my thoughts on how to confidently navigate a career in media, as well as just a journey of entrepreneurship. I do, as you're alluding to, consider myself both. I consider myself to both have a career in corporate America on the media side, as well as be an entrepreneur of a little bit of all things. And I know that we'll talk more about that. I did think it would be important to just share a few minutes, maybe a minute or two of my story, because my story, is the reason why I'm in media. I grew up in a community called Inglewood, California. Technically, if you're flying into the LAX airport, you're flying into Inglewood. I grew up within a 3-minute drive of the LAX airport. But at the time of growing up in the sort of mid to late 1980s, again, I'm not going to date myself, but let's just suffice to say that that I was like growing up, in kind of the mid 80s. It wasn't the greatest of neighborhoods. There were drugs, there were gangs, there were all sorts of vices and distractions for a child my age going into elementary school and junior high school. And I didn't have what I would say is we didn't have a lot of financial means. Like we had to, my parents did the best they could. We had to figure it out. I didn't get a lot of direction in the home to help me academically and to even help me think about college. But I was fortunate, I consider myself very fortunate because I had this immense potential. And eventually was just fortunate to have the right guidance counselors that took me under their wing in junior high school. They saw my capabilities. They saw that my potential exceeded the opportunities that were offered to me by Inglewood High School. And so this particular guidance counselor in the 8th grade, his name is Gregory Silverman. I'll never forget him. He pulled me to the side and he said, look, there is this new high school. It's called the California Academy of Mathematics and Science. So it's more of like what they would call today STEM high school that's being created, and it's on Cal State Dominguez Hills campus. So the good news is that this will provide you with like the advanced placement academic and educational curriculum that I know that you're capable of. And then, you know, in the 11th grade of your year, you can start actually attending college classes at Cal State Dominguez Hills. The bad news is that, look, you're going to have to be bused 2 hours each way from Inglewood to Carson, California, you know, which is where Cal State Dominguez Hills was located. And it would be very long days and even longer nights, you know, trying to get in homework and you know, and all of that. But I was committed to find a way to get out of the gangs and the drugs and the vices. And so I did it. I didn't even ask my parents. You know, I did it. I applied. I ended up getting accepted, you know, to this magnet pilot program that I didn't even know was going to be around for a full 4 years of my high school education. Thankfully, it did end up being around for 4 years. But after I got in, after I accepted, then I told my father, my relatively domineering father, that I would be doing this. And he hated the idea. He didn't like it. But at the end of the day, this was my passion. Like I was convicted, like, you know, and I think that he saw the emotion and the tears within me. And knew that he had to let me try it. So he said, okay, let's try it for a few weeks. Let's see how we both like it, and ended up loving it. It ended up being, you know, again, everything that propelled me into what I am today. They provided me with a mentor. Again, I'll never forget her name, Susan Wegleitner. She was a vice president of Bank of America. And it would be Susan who encouraged me to go to college and to think of these great programs that they were offering, like Sponsors for Educational Opportunity and other programs that were providing entry points for students of color into careers like investment banking and law and consulting. You know, I would go on to become, you know, an analyst at JP Morgan in their mergers and acquisitions program. And it was only by chance that I ended up into this career of media, because NBC was a client of JP Morgan's telecom, media, and tech mergers and acquisitions practice. And 4 years, you know, into my time at JP Morgan, NBC calls me and says, "Look, we're hiring for an in-house, you know, corporate finance team. Would love for you to interview." So I interviewed and got the job, and you know, that would have been my sort of happenstance, you know, into media. But that's a little bit of you know, my journey. During that time, I spent, you know, a total of 7 years at NBC Universal. It would eventually merge with Universal and become NBC Universal. And I also went to Harvard Business School during that time and decided to get my master's in business administration, where I ultimately fell in love with the idea of becoming a general manager. So that's a little bit of a segue into me, you know, becoming the general manager at Essence Communications, which I can also talk a little bit more about later today. But anyway, that's how I ended up in media. It's a long journey, not necessarily the most direct path, but I just took advantage of every opportunity that was in front of me. And to be honest, I took advantage of every relationship and networking opportunity that was also presented to me as well.
Well, thank you so much for that, Joy. Truly inspiring. Great to hear about where you're from and how you got into this. I would love to hear from you what is most inspiring about this industry and what you're finding is the greatest challenge. You spoke a lot about inclusion and people like you and where you're from. What challenges are you seeing in there as well?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. And you know, I talked about, you know, eventually in 2007, just to spend a little bit more time, you know, on my path at Essence, because I do think that this was a defining moment for me in my career in media. I had been at NBC, was doing a great job, enjoyed what I did there. But again, I fell in love with this idea of being a general manager. And a recruiter from Time Warner, who I had worked with at some point in my career at NBC, called me up. She reached out. She said, "Joy, there's this job as a position available as a general manager at Essence Communications that I think you should interview for, and I think you'd be great at." And it was a dream come true for a young Black girl from Inglewood, California, that had grown up with Essence magazine and on her coffee table, her parents' coffee table, everywhere, every beauty salon she had been to. Essence was the epitome of what it meant to be a beautiful Black woman on the inside and on the out. So immediately I said, yes, I'll absolutely interview for this job.
Right.
I was fortunate enough, to get it. But it was at Essence where I think my idea of media transformed. Because not only, was it a dream come true for me, but it was a unique opportunity to come into work every day for a brand where it was about empowering other women to see themselves as beautiful and capable in a world where most Black girls didn't see themselves. I didn't see myself as capable and beautiful and worthy and able. And Essence lived for that mission of super serving Black women and Black girls in a way where they can see themselves as being successful in whatever definition that looked like. And so for me, to your point, the inspiration that media became for me was more than just a business. Of course, we had to make revenue. We had to make a profit. I was a general manager. That was my job scope, was to make revenue, was to make profit. But I came into work every day for this bigger purpose. And that became, how do you tell stories in a way that inspire and empower people? And now that is why I am in media. It's a great field, and it can be to, your question, Elena, like what are also the challenges? It's a great field. There's a great deal of opportunity. But if you get this idea of telling stories right, meaning how can you balance the opportunity of telling the truth in a story, but then also the opportunity of being aspirational in how you tell a story so that you can improve the quality of the world that we live in for the better. That is the inspiration behind media. It's the storytelling at the end of the day. And the storytelling connects with everyday people in a way where it can not only be a reflection of who we are as people, but it can also be that aspiration that pushes us to want to be more and to define our lives as meaning more and inspiring other people and encouraging other people. The challenge in media today is that most media companies, don't understand that unique balance. They want to tell information, they want to entertain people, but they don't understand, most media companies don't understand the responsibility of the aspirational aspect that they have to do. So when you think about media, and I'm sure that you all, your college students, your post-secondary, like you understand this whole concept of the full funnel of marketing, right? So you know that there's an upper funnel of awareness reach marketing, that there's this lower funnel of sort of transactional marketing and what they call performance marketing. But what most companies do is they focus on the masses. They want to get this customer reach. They want to get their impressions, as we call them, as high as they want. They want to get the eyeballs that they're serving as high as they want. So the game almost shifts to getting as many people as you possibly can. And as we all know, 60% of this country is still white Americans. There's followed by 19% is Latino. And then another 14% is Black. But if you only care about the masses, you'll only speak to what's called the general market of America. And you'll miss the opportunity to connect with people of color. And I think that's really where people like me, when I stepped into this job at FreeVee, which is a part of the Prime Video portfolio here at Amazon, my role, it wasn't about how do I just deliver the performance and the metrics and the revenue and the profit. It was really about how do I step into a purpose and the responsibility of ensuring that Prime Video connected with individuals at the basic level of their identity. Race, it's about race. It's about what we do. It's about adding that layer of socioeconomics so that you can identify opportunities to not only provide the information to our audience of color, but to also provide the aspiration. And so I'm excited about it. It requires people like me who have backgrounds like I did and who saw media as a way out of their environment and as a way to encourage and inspire other people. But we need more people like this group and this audience in this field of media to own and understand the true responsibility of not only balancing the information that you have to provide and in your storytelling, but also the aspiration. So I'm excited about that. I'm happy to roll up my sleeves and jump into this. If anybody wants to ping me on LinkedIn, Joy Profet, we can roll up our sleeves and figure this out together. But it's going to take a lot more professionals of color in this business to get that right and to make the shift in media of being more of a purpose-driven opportunity versus just about the profit and bottom line.
Wow, truly powerful, Joy. Thank you so much for that. And we're so grateful to have you in this community. And hopefully we'll keep working together as we continue with our new students and bringing more aspirational storytelling to more industry professionals. It's really important work that you're doing. So thank you for that. Speaking of all of these big aspirations and inspirations, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, knowing what you know now, what would you tell her? What would you say to your undergraduate self?
That's such a good question. And I've spoken a little bit about my career in media. Again, corporate America, Prime Video, Amazon, it couldn't get more corporate America than that. But there's also this entrepreneurial side of me. And, I was fortunate enough through Essence's journey. Ultimately, Essence became independently owned by a Black family, the Dennis family, who was also they were very entrepreneurial. They owned Sundial Brands, which is Shea Moisture and other businesses that they grew from the ground up. And they also had what they called the New Voices Fund, which they created after they sold Sundial to Unilever. They created this fund with the proceeds of that sale to invest in other diverse owned businesses that needed the access to capital to grow. And so I met them in the course of that family also acquiring Essence as a part of that portfolio. And they introduced me to these entrepreneurs of all different industries, beauty industry, financial industry, education, a whole gamut. And I began to eventually get to know and coach, these entrepreneurs as part of my remit as the chief operating officer of Essence. By that time, I'd become, the chief operating officer. I rolled up my sleeves and figured out how can I help them to problem solve their business plans, or how can I provide professional service opportunities like legal training, bookkeeping training, how to think about controllership, in what their companies did. And it was an invaluable opportunity for me to think about, wow, you can be an entrepreneur. You don't have to have $100,000 saved up. You don't even have to have $10,000 saved up to be an entrepreneur. But what's most important is to really see, during the course of that time, I met quite a few people in entertainment. So MC Light became a dear friend. She's also part of, my sorority. She and Lynn Richardson, her manager at the time, kicked off this whole financial literacy, training series that they would do at conferences. And one of their biggest messages that resonated to me, that will always stay with me, it is what I wish I was able to share with my 20-year-old self, is that you can do it all. You don't have to just work in corporate America for a paycheck and a salary. You don't just have to be an entrepreneur, and risk your savings and really hustle to try to get the investment and the equity to start and keep your businesses afloat. You don't have to just be an investor. Like, in today's day and age, and with the help of technology, you can actually do it all. And the trick and the key, as MC Light and Lynn Richardson would say, is about ensuring generational wealth for you and your families by having multiple streams of income. So not just relying on just your salary or on just the hustling and bootstrapping of your entrepreneurship venture, or just investing. You actually want to live in all three places at the same time. And for me, that was something I'd never thought about until much later in I would be easily 15 to 20 years of I mean, again, I'm not going to date myself, but I would easily be decades, into my career before I put two and two together that at any point in time, I should be living in all three of these places. So I am in corporate America. I get my day-to-day salary. I'm also an entrepreneur. I have my consulting business that exists where I continue to help other entrepreneurs in thinking about their business plans. And then I also have now, when I say my investments, of course, I have my 401k investments, but I also have these apps like Acorn and Fundrise that help me to put little bits of money into these portfolios that then generate return for me. They're passive. I'm by no means an active investor. Like I've yet to figure that out on like an active perspective. But I'm happy to say that I live in all three places. And this has only been in the last 5 years of my life that I've done this. But as my 20-year-old self, now speaking to you all, you can do it all. Now, you probably can't spend 40 hours a week doing all three, right? So you have to figure out the balance. But what do you do? Like, how are you active in all three, where just to get you enough money, maybe to start your entrepreneur endeavor, maybe you take on a salaried role in corporate America. And then you find the right time to shift into being a full-time entrepreneur. So that's the balance. It's just figuring out the right timing, but always thinking very strategically and intentionally about how you live in all three places.
Thank you for that, Joy. I know it can be challenging to figure out how to invest, especially as someone who's FGLI or first-gen low income, coming from a place where that's not really being discussed. So it's great to hear that you're not giving up on your entrepreneurship. You're not giving up on your creativeness if you're taking a job in corporate America. You got to put your oxygen mask on first before you go and save the world and help everybody else. So really great to hear about that. Joy, you mentioned that you went to Harvard Business School. Could you share more about your decision to pursue graduate studies in media and why you ultimately chose to do that?
Yes, no, absolutely. So I, have a relentless curiosity. I would definitely encourage everyone, even again, whether you're living in that, I'm just going to go into corporate America right now with the 40 to 60 hours a week that of living daytime and day life that I have to work each week, or I'm going to go into just being an entrepreneur. I'm going to go into both, you should definitely always have like a relentless curiosity and live in this space of learn and be curious. Here at Amazon, they have what's called leadership principles, that govern how people think and how people prioritize what they're going to do. Anything from customer obsession to deliver results, to hire the best talent. It's a whole litany of leadership principles. But the one that I've really loved is this notion of learn and be curious. You always come into something to learn more and to never stop asking questions. And so when I was at NBC, and just really starting, my career in media, I said to myself, I love it here. I have a great path, a great runway in my career here, but I'm curious to learn more. And not only am I curious to learn more, but I also want to really develop my network. I still feel relatively undeveloped and untrained in this area of networking. And so I applied to Harvard Business School. I was accepted into Harvard Business School. Now that Harvard offers a general management master's in business administration, but you can take specialties. So I would go on to take like specializations in media, which taught me a little bit more about how to apply general management and that function into the media industry. So it was very helpful in that regard. But I would just say that, not only did I learn, I've made some of the best friends, in my life that I'll ever make. But then the networking, that network has stayed with me. Whenever I need to know, okay, I'm interested in working for Amazon. And literally this happened. This position came up at Amazon. I was at a media agency at the time at Interpublic Group. This position came available. Someone pinged me and sent it into my inbox. And I wanted to know more about Amazon. So I called up 3 of my fellow alums, from Harvard Business School. There's always going to be someone, from your graduate school who's going to be somewhere who you can ask for advice, learn more. And that has proven, to be just, an incredible network and an incredible continued funnel, of learning for me as well. But I would just challenge graduate studies to do it. You can take, there's now the virtual world of learning has provided endless opportunities for us to just log on to something and take courses, virtually and in our downtime, to do homework. Continue to learn, continue to grow, and continue to build your networks. Those are the three things that you really have to do no matter where you are in your career. And I guarantee you'll always not only have a job, but you'll always be successful, in whatever it is that you do. And successful doesn't mean you'll have more wins than you will have misses, but it means that it'll be possible for you to continue to push the fold of whatever venture it is that you're doing. And you'll push that fold to do more and to lend itself to deeper impact with the customers that you're serving and the communities of people that you're serving and what you do. So it's really exciting. Again, ping me on LinkedIn if you have any questions on that, or are even considering, your graduate studies, whether it's business school or communications programs and graduate studies. I'd love to help you think through that.
Oh, thank you so much for being a resource, Joy. Thanks for extending that. To our students who are listening, who are just starting out, what's your best advice or strategy in starting to build that network? What do you think the first steps of that would be for them?
Yeah, I like really your college. And again, I'm not going to date myself, but when I went to UCLA for undergrad, the affinity groups and the clubs and the organizations were not quite as advanced and developed as what they even are today. Tapping into those affinity groups, the clubs, the organizations that allow you, even if you don't know that something is your passion point, and you just want to dibble and just learn more, tap into those clubs, tap into those affinity groups and those organizations, and use that as a networking springboard, to propel you into, it could be a role that you're looking to go for. It could be an entrepreneurial business plan that you're looking to launch. Those are great resources. Your fellow students, as well as your professors, are great resources to vet, those concepts and those ideas. And then, again, like this world of everything virtual, all things digital, the information for you to just Google whatever is right at your fingertips. And you can join these virtual clubs, and programs and organizations if you feel you're interested in something, but it's not available to you within your local college, setting. You can go online and then just join those affinity groups, those interest programs there, learn more. There's so much available, even on LinkedIn. I'm getting pinged almost every day with different, webinars to tune into, or things that are going live that are part of my interest group that I've signaled, on LinkedIn. So do that, learn more. And then I think eventually as you learn more, you'll understand and identify with what's key is not, even for me, and you all are scholars, right? So it's not necessarily going to be what you're good at. It's going to always also be what you're passionate about, because it's the passion, that'll keep you wanting to come in every day. And again, wanting to here at Amazon, they call it high bar. To leave high bar impact is not just to make an impact in your day-to-day job. It's to leave the community at Amazon better off than what it was before it found you. And you want to do that. You want to be able to do that, in your career. How do you leave the job? How do you leave the culture of the organization in a better place moving forward than where you found it? And that will only happen if not only are you good at what you're doing, but you're passionate about what you're doing. So
fantastic. Thank you so much, Joy. We do have sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Thank you. We do have a few questions in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and give those to you. Someone asked, what's the best part of your current role at FreeVee?
Yeah, I'd say it's such a good question. And to be honest, I'd say like in Amazon, I've just hit my 1 year mark here at FreeVee, which is again underneath the Prime Video division, a part of Amazon. And within your first year at Amazon, they really encourage you to just learn. Like, yes, hopefully I've been productive, and hopefully I'd like to think I've delivered results for the goals that we set out for ourselves in 2023. But I've done a ton of learning, and what that's enabled me to do is to structure a job and a role where I can really jump into anything. I have, Elena alluded to this. I am a key member of our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee here at FreeVee. I believe I've encouraged, our business leaders to think about their businesses differently, and through that layer of diversity and inclusion, and through that layer of aspiration, and have also encouraged us to set real goals that hold ourselves accountable. Are we spending a minimum of our paid media budgets with diverse owned media companies to help in promoting the FreeVee brand, as an example? Are we thinking about hiring? And if we can't hire because maybe there's a recession or whatever is looming, are we thinking about the attrition, continuing to keep diverse employee base here at FreeVee and across all of Amazon? And so I'm really excited that there's no boundary here, at FreeVee, to stepping into greater lanes of ownership. And to really thinking about your role as leaving an impact beyond just the revenue and the profit. But I do believe, in my short time here, which, again, has just been a year as of this week, I feel as if I've been able to meet what they consider that high bar, which is where hopefully if I were to leave Amazon tomorrow or FreeVee tomorrow, I've now left this business in a better place than where I found it. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you. All right, everybody, I think we have time for about one more question. So feel free to put your questions in the chat if you have any. We have about another minute here. Let me see. All right, Joy, last question here. What's been the favorite part of your network that you're going to take with you beyond your next steps and next aspirations at Amazon?
You said the favorite part of my network? Is
yes.
that right?
Yes.
What was actually so neat. So what happens is that I talked about sort of living in these three spaces where you're not only taking a salary from corporate America, but you're also being an entrepreneur. And then finally, your investments, passive investments for me. Eventually, those three things start to intersect because of your network. So I now, have colleagues and, fellow alums from Harvard who are now in that space of their careers where they have these massive portfolios of investments, and they're now looking for places to put it. So they've called me up and said, look, if you're starting something, you have a good plan, you have a good business model, you think you're going to make a profit in 3 years, let's talk. I have money, I have no place to put it. I'd love to figure out something where we can work together, where it's something that you're launching or you're creating. And my company, let's use BlackRock as an example, because that's a real example for me, where I have, someone that I went to HBS with. We both graduated in 2004. He's now managing this large portfolio that's specifically to invest in diverse owned businesses. So now it's like, oh, great. Like, I get to be an entrepreneur, because because someone that I know from my network, at Harvard Business School is going to invest in my business idea. So those three things eventually, start to merge. And it's so neat to see how they come together, because once they start to come together, it becomes a little easier to live in all three spaces, at the same time. But that's been the funnest part, is seeing it all kind of come full circle. They would call that the flywheel, here, like seeing things all come full circle. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you for answering it. Joy, that is all the time we have allotted for today, but thank you so much for being here and for offering yourself. Is there any way for students to get in touch with you after this? I know you mentioned LinkedIn. Is there any other social media we can catch you on?
Yeah, thank you, Elena. I'm actually most active on LinkedIn. You can
Okay.
catch me on Facebook as well. You'll see more pictures of me and my kids on Facebook than you will LinkedIn. But ping me on LinkedIn and I'll definitely be there. But thank you, Elena, and thank you, Dolly, so much, and the full team at ODI. And best wishes for an amazing conference this week.
Thank you so much, Joy. Have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week, safe travels.
Thank
and
you.
We'll touch base again.
Okay, you too. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.